Good afternoon, everyone. It's me, Sonal Dave, your award-winning public speaking expert, Celebrant and Toastmaster. And I'm back here again today on the topic of neurodiversity, journals, but doing it through interviewing some fabulous people. And honestly, it's just been such a pleasure meeting some wonderful people, hearing their stories about themselves, their children, their families, their businesses, how they've just not let it stop them from being what they want to be, doing what they want to do, and just being successful, not only in themselves, but in their lives and their business, their families, communities. So I'm absolutely excited to have this very handsome gentleman come and join me. And why I'm so excited is because I've only had one before, so and that was Shailene Shah. But today I have a round of applause and a little bit of a drum roll. We have the wonderful Mike Cole. Hey, Mike.
Hello. Oh, what an intro. What an
Uh,
intro.
thank you so much for being here today with me on this. I can't work out if it's gloomy or is the sun out or is it windy. It's just a bit strange, isn't it, today?
It is, absolutely. Classic English weather, I think, though. Could threaten rain, could threaten sun any moment. You'd never know.
Absolutely. So Mike, the big question, of course, is who are you and what do you do?
Good question. Good question. And I'll try and give my shorter version. So I'm an ICF-accredited coach, but I've got a background in corporate finance. So I'm actually a chartered accountant as well. And I tend to disconnect those. I've deliberately put those at either end of the sentence because I think it can conjure up a certain instant impression of a kind of coach who's a chartered accountant. Okay. And actually, I'm probably not what instantly comes to mind. I work nowadays trying to help people. So I absolutely believe we're all special. Okay, and I think that's going to come out in this conversation. We're all special, and if we lean into what makes us special, we can do absolutely incredible work. The more incredible stuff we do, the better value everyone else gets. We get, and everyone else gets. The better the world will be. And if everyone leant into what makes them special, I honestly think the world would be this incredible place to live and exist. And I would love it if that happened. I'm on a bit of a mission to help people towards that. Okay, so that means having a work which actually works for us. Okay, and so we're doing stuff that we probably enjoy, we probably are good at, but can also be stuff we find challenging, and we're nurturing ourselves and we're growing. So it's not just natural, what we naturally already can do. So I work with career professionals, and I work with small businesses to evolve their careers and their small businesses to really lean into the bit that makes them, not only makes them special, but how they operate at their best, and put them back in control of what's going on in their lives. So I absolutely love doing that. There's an awful lot of strategy stuff around that, a bit about mindset, not a huge amount, but a bit about mindset, and a bit around sort of productivity tools and things like that too.
Wow, that's a lot in there. And I think if you started to break that down, you'd be kind of going, wow, how, when, what, which, where, why, all those questions would come into mind. And also, Mike, you're a parent, right?
Yeah. I'm not, well, right. So I'm a parent. I'm also one of, so with my wife, we home educate our two children, um, who are now at sort of GCSE age, but we've done this for the last 6.5 years. So, that's been a big journey in its own right. Been very interesting to see how, um, how children can learn, and doing it outside of the classroom, in a different environment where I suppose we have much more free reign to just explore what's right for them, which is scary and what is it? Unconventional in many ways, but has huge benefits, and so that has been fascinating in its own right.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because I'm a big believer in that we're definitely all special and that we should all be celebrated. And actually, we do need to sort of move away from the conventional because we're also all very individual. And it's almost like certain processes as part of growing up are like sheep being herded into a classroom, into an office, onto a train, onto a bus. And you kind of almost feel, no, some people actually, whether, learning at home, if you have I don't know if you remember, I mean, I remember growing up and sometimes we had sessions outdoors in the playground or
Yeah.
the grass or, and actually I enjoyed that much more because I didn't feel kind of confined in this box, with this
Yeah.
teacher at the front with that scratchy chalkboard, that just makes me filled with horror. Uh,
Did you typically find there were things like English rather than maths? Because that was certainly true for us. It would be, maybe a geography lesson, maybe an English lesson. It was never a maths lesson or a physics lesson or something like that.
No, it was never kind of the sciences, the English, the math. Yeah, you're right. Kind of those key subjects. Yeah, it was never those. Those had to be in front of a chalkboard.
Yeah.
I think as we got older, it became a whiteboard as opposed to a chalkboard. But yeah, no, definitely. And I just think if we kind of take that concept of we're special, we're individual, and actually it's wonderful to step out of the conventional, and actually, you might find that a few more children and adults flourish when
Yeah.
you, shake it up a bit and give a different space, a different opportunity, a different chance. But unfortunately, like society and processes that politics put in place for us doesn't always allow that, but it doesn't stop us from trying.
Right. I think there's a real challenge, and I know, well, education is probably not the route we want to go down, but I know there's a real challenge where you're trying to you're trying to work on an averages basis. You're trying to find the thing that will work for most people, but of course that won't work for everyone because what works for most won't work for everyone. That's if we find
Yeah.
a system that literally does work for every single person, then actually we won't be helping them achieve their own what makes them special.
Yeah.
And so there's the whole balance in that, and I don't think there's any easy answer. I just want to be really clear. I'm not anti-school because I think schools are very important. I'm not anti-formal education because formal education is very important. It's a really complex situation, and it's been a privilege for me to see how it can be different, but it does come at plenty of challenges, plenty of compromises from us, plenty of compromises for my wife and I's time, like how we spend that time, money, and all
Yeah.
sorts of other things. So it's um, it's not an easy answer for sure.
No. And I suppose the thing is, you can still, I think there's almost, give the teachers a little bit of leeway. You can still have some in classroom, some not in classroom. God, I can't remember the name of the advert. I think it's a teacher's advert where they're recruiting for teachers, and there's a teacher who's, I think, teaching sciences, and one of the children just can't get it and just doesn't understand it, and so the teacher moves all the tables back and the chairs, and he's got the children almost being molecules in DNA, and suddenly it's like, oh, so that's what it is. So I think it's
Yeah.
more about the different styles, but again, I'm not a teacher, so I don't know if they're allowed to do that. Is it inverted commas accepted?
Right. I was a parent governor before so the children went to school. I was a parent governor in an Ofsted outstanding primary school, and it's an outstanding school. It is unquestionably very, very good, and they were doing exactly what they were asked to do, and they were excelling at what they were asked to do, and that was not the right environment for my children.
Mm,
And that is in its own right interesting because that's not about the teachers, it's not about the school, it is about the system, and it doesn't mean the system is broken for everybody. But that system didn't. That particular school complying so well with the rules was not the right place for my children. And
yeah.
I say, it's a really complex thing to try and sort of get around, but it's a privilege to see how it can be different. There we
Yeah,
go.
no, I totally understand that. And I can imagine the sacrifices that both you and your wife do make. But at the end of the day, you've chosen to go down a path that is right for you and for your children.
Mm.
And it'll be interesting to hear a later date, like where they end up and what they end up doing. I'll be calling you back to sort of say, how'd it go? What happened?
Well,
But
yeah, give it 4 years and ask them, and 'cause that's the real acid test, isn't it? Well, how have they found it, and has it set them up right for the future?
absolutely, you're right. You've just told me, and you should tell me. And I like being told. Yep, it's actually let's ask the children because often we hear the answers that we maybe don't want to always hear when we actually do ask the child. And sometimes actually we learn so much from the child when we actually give them the opportunity to tell us and share with us. Yeah, you're absolutely right there, Mike. Thank you for pulling me up on that.
Well, I didn't mean to do that too
No,
directly,
no, no,
but
you must do. You must
it's
do.
the right way. You know, that's
No,
it's
absolutely. And remember, we're all individual, we're all learning all the time.
totally.
So, gentle reminders are always appreciated, definitely by me. So, I wanted to talk about kind of neurodiversity. It's a topic that many people shy away from.
Mm,
Some people close the front door and hope that they'll never have to speak to anyone about it, detrimental to themselves and the children. And some people are, well, hold on, no, we need to talk about this. So I'm kind of in this place at the moment where I've launched my journals for the neurodiverse community. I looked around to see who was really talking about it and was sharing awareness and educating and understanding. And I didn't find as many people as I think I kind of, fingers crossed, had hoped that I would have found a lot more people. And not to say there are not people out there who are talking about it and who are doing it really successfully,
mm,
but it made me think, okay, Sonal, and I'm not sure how much of this might you know, but I was talking to parents in the Asian community who had children with neurodiverse conditions or were carers of an adult with a neurodiverse condition and were not really finding products that could help them. And that's what spurred me on to create the focus group, make sure I was getting things correct and in the right way. Um, so that we could, at the end of the day, have a product that was structured, that was a safe place, but met the needs as well of not all, but a majority of the neurodiverse community. What's been your journey? What's it been like for you?
yeah. It's been fascinating, and it's been most fascinating the last few years reflecting back on it. It's been a big change for me looking back. So let me take us on a bit of a journey. Mid 90s, I was sort of picked up as being dyslexic. I used to say I'm a bit dyslexic, and that was because I was picked up because my brother's dyslexic, and I used to say he's more dyslexic than I am. And I'm hoping that and I want to sort of just highlight there's no such thing as a bit or more dyslexic. You are dyslexic or you aren't dyslexic. It is a yes or a no because it's the way your brain works. Of course, within that, there is a huge variety of different ways that affects you. And within that, there are a huge number of benefits, which is something I want to come back to because we often talk about it. It's talked as a learning difficulty, which is horrendous wording. It's talked about as a negative, and it should not be. It absolutely needs to not be talked about as negative. So that's something that needs to change. I was picked up in the 90s, say, because my brother is dyslexic, and they said, we think it's genetic. We're doing some studies to see if it's genetic or not. We're testing siblings. Why don't we test your straight set one, academically high achiever, we'll test him anyway. Okay, I mean, sure, why not? And it came back and said, yeah, you're dyslexic. And I pretty much, I took the extra time and I said, yeah, thank you very much. I'll take the, perceived gains, and I'll almost literally throw the report in the bin, screw it up, throw it away, never think about it, never consider it again. And what's happened over the years now, so it actually came when I came to looking at the children, and there's certain traits they have, and I'm like, yeah, they're neurodiverse traits, at least I believe they are. So we kind of explore that. And you read reports, and then you're like, oh, that sounds familiar. Actually, the first response is, oh, no. Oh, no, hang on. What's mine say? And I actually had to phone. This shows how disconnected to my report I am. I phoned my mum up and was like, have you still got my report from the 90s? This was a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And she's like, yeah, sure. I'll scan it and email it over. And I had a read, and I was like, yeah, this stuff affects me. The stuff that I'm reading that affects some of my children absolutely mirrors some of the challenges that I've had. And yet now I can look back and think, actually, how did that affect me, and what did I do to overcome it? Now, there's a couple of things that I have kept absolute secret until June this year is the first time I started talking about this stuff, and I'm being as open as I can now about it. So 2 of the things that came out in my report, one of which is a processing speed challenge, and the other is a memory challenge. These have been kept absolute secret because I can see no upside, none, of sharing them. So what comes to mind when you say to someone, I've got a processing speed challenge? A bit slow? Maybe a bit thick? You
Takes
don't.
you a bit of time. You've got to read it maybe 3 times before you work it out.
Right. So the processing speed thing means to me, I need to just literally leave some lapse time if it's something I've never considered. If it's something I've considered, I come to a very fast response. And that's how I get around it. What I realized through reflection is when I look back, I'm a little bit of a natural worrier. I think about things. And so like the human bit of my brain, if you go down the 3 different types of brain approach, like so for example, in the chimp paradox, the human brain thinks, it programs the computer brain, which is the fastest responding brain. So I'm brilliant in a crisis because I respond fast, and I deal, sort stuff out. I'm also brilliant because the dyslexic nature of my brain means I have this big picture view. I just get the big picture. I just understand how things fit together. I get complex problems very, very quickly, and they're not complex to me. So to me, I go in, someone goes, oh, Mike, it's a nightmare. We've got all this stuff going on and blah, 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 blah. And I ask a few questions and I go, give me a sheet of paper. And in a single sheet, I can describe how we can solve the problem. And they're like, but we've had teams of people work for months and not be able to solve this problem. And honestly, to me, it's a bit like going, what color is this mug? I mean, to me, it looks red. Am I not on the camera? It's a bit faded. But to me, it's as obvious as going, well, it's kind of a flowery white on red mug. It's that, like, honestly, it's that obvious. And so what happens is we focus in on the processing speed and we miss the upside. The memory is a challenge. My memory level is wherever for me. In terms of all my other skills and capability, which should be here, my memory's here. So I do stuff to make sure my memory is here and not lower, like, memory tricks and all sorts of different stuff, of course. But it will never be at the level of capability of the stuff. But if I tell that to somebody, if I say, I'm in finance, we are meant to remember numbers. If I say, by the way, I really struggle to remember numbers, is that going to help my promotion opportunities? No.
No, but
It shouldn't cause a problem. But you have to go back and say, but if it has no upside, why would I share it? Like, all I'm doing is giving a weakness away. And in a world which is competitive by the very nature of it, why would I give away a weakness? What's fascinating now looking back, and I've got some really good examples of where I did compensations to eliminate challenges that I had, which actually became best practice because they're just the best way of doing it. And if you want, I can share one. But what's interesting now looking back is the same thing that said I can't show those meant I was also unable to go, but here's the massive upside of what I can do. The flip of that is I didn't need to say here's the massive upside of what I can do, because when you walk in, Jenny walked in to a large matrix organization company, 3 weeks in there, solved a problem a team had been working on for 6 months. I solved the way to unlock the problem that others have been trying for 6 months and hadn't got. When you've done that, you don't need to say to someone, by the way, this is a skill of mine. They know. Okay. And after that, your card is marked in a very positive way that says, this is the kind of guy that we want to come in and solve this kind of problem. And that worked out very well for me. So I think to me, that's why things are kind of more hidden. And that was my journey. I kept it absolutely secret. When was it? August this year, I went back to see a former boss of mine, someone I've got an awful lot of time and respect for. And we had a chat and I explained I'm now out talking about neurodiversity, specifically dyslexia in my case. Although there's autism in my family as well, so I'm kind of quite aware of that. And I explained a bit about how it's affected me. Now, I've worked for this person for years, and it was the look on their face was brilliant because it just showed they had no idea. They were surprised, and they're like, yeah. And that's, again, part of it. It's not being talked about because of the negativity associated to it. We need to talk about it purely from a positive, not from a how do we overcome the challenges, but from a this is why it's amazing and brilliant.
Absolutely, Mike. And I think part of why I want to do these videos is because what's definitely coming out of it, all these videos and the feedback I'm getting is that, oh, we've always sort of sat there going, autism, uh-oh, ADHD, uh-oh, dyslexia, uh-oh. I know somebody who is dyslexic and has spent most of his life being kind of shamed by his family, not seen as a high achiever, who over the pandemic got himself a degree, is now doing what he wants to do, is loving what he wants, doing what he wanted to always do,
Mm.
and now the family can't really shame him anymore. And it's like, why do I know we kind of struggle. The interview I was doing yesterday, and this whole thing about labels, and almost like labels create that toxicity, the negativity. um I shared a couple of interviews ago that I was born with congenital hip dysplasia, so I have both a physical disability, and later in my years, not long ago, was diagnosed with a hidden disability. Now, I know for sure that if I'd walked into any interview and said, "Oh, and by the way," they would have either, to be quite honest, they would have either gone, "Right, do we have anyone? No, great, tick in the box, let's hire her." Or they would have gone, "Thank you, we'll be in touch." And I've heard stories from people who've got various neurodiverse conditions who kind of, I don't know whether to put it on my CV or not. I don't know, do I mention it? And we all know that it shouldn't be seen as anything negative or be seen as, oh, well, Mike's dyslexic, so hello, let's just not give him a job ever in the whole wide world. Actually, it should be seen as, Mike is different, he's special, let's celebrate that. Do we need to put anything in place just to help him? You know, for me, it was a chair and a table so I
Right.
could sit and stand,
Yeah.
depending on what was happening. And it might be the same for different people. It could be the at core hours, avoiding busy times on trains and
Yeah.
motorways and whatever. So I really do want to change this conversation from it being it's a bad thing to actually it's a good thing. Mike's awesome. He's different. He's
Yeah.
special. He might have dyslexia, but you know what? Look at him. He's successful. And I really want people to be doing that. And I trust me, I know I can't do it on my own. So
Right. We need a whole bunch of people to be talking about it, but we can make the change. And what I find exciting, let's just go to that example of the chair and table. I think we need to come away from a conversation that says, what adjustment do we need to make so that you can function within this team? I think that's the wrong way of putting it, or that it's the wrong opening question. It's an okay question for later on, but it's the wrong opening question. The first question should be, what skills are you bringing into this team, and are they the
mm,
skills we need? Okay, and then we want to know, are you the kind of person that will flourish in our kind of environment? This might be a stressful, high pressure, pushy, direct environment that certain people will flourish in that and some won't. It might be a really nurturing but actually quite unclear about the targets, but you need to be quite self-motivated. There's different sorts of environments you can have, and you need to know that person. Those are the two things that I think we should look for when we're looking at team members, when we're looking at recruiting, when we're looking at our own teams. I think then there's a question of, are we doing something which is hindering your ability to bring that sparkle and magic? And I think that's where actually, I'm stood at a desk right now because I know that it's good to stand. So like maybe it's a case of having a stand-sit desk is going to make a real difference to someone, as an example. Not because they've got a bad back, but because they don't want to have a bad back. That's a pretty reasonable angle, okay?
yeah.
It might be that they actually need wheelchair access, or they need it might be that they're an introvert and actually that in the space they've come up with these fantastic, brilliant ideas, but they could do with a quiet room, because
Mm,
actually the open plan office is just a bit noisy at times. And so having a space that is a quiet room that they can sit in. So fine, but that shouldn't be what we start with. It shouldn't, I
yeah.
don't think it should be on the CV, because I don't think it should personally, because I don't think it should say Mike is dyslexic. I think it should say, here are Mike's amazing skills. This is why Mike is an exceptional in your team. Okay.
So I'm laughing because I'm just thinking about my CV. If I started it with, hello, Sonal Dave, brown, disabled,
What?
physical and hidden, 4'9". So there must be a shortism thing out there as well. You know, nobody's ever going to hire me again, right? So
Well, but
that's
again,
what
what?
was going through my head.
But you could say that and then say, but it's not relevant for you to, consider that, because that's the point. It's not relevant to consider that I'm dyslexic. It's not relevant to consider if I've got ADHD, but only it is to say, can I do the work? Like, have I got the right skills? Have I got the right thing? And then is the environment the kind of environment in which I will thrive and be able to use that? And if you think you've got the skills and the environment isn't quite right, maybe we can adjust the environment so that we can get you in because you've got the right skills, then great.
Yeah.
But absolutely, leading with, I'm brown, I'm this height, I'm whatever,
Yeah.
is as unhelpful in my view as leading with any label of any
No.
form.
Now imagine if you switch that now into the family environment, the family, the extended family, the community. You know, imagine if people saw the ability as opposed to the label. Don't you think that would be such a lovely society would be better? So as in rather than be better, we would just be more human and kind. You know, we would actually share caring and sharing as opposed to, oh, let's cross the street because Mike's walking down and he's part of the neurodiverse community. Do you know, I jest as I say that, but I'm sure you
Yeah,
understand where I'm coming
I,
from. Have
I
you
totally
ever had
understand.
that in your family?
No,
Extended.
and so no, my family's been, um, I think it's been nothing but supportive. Not least because my parents took it seriously enough when we were young enough to try and find us a decent enough school that could deal with it, which again in the 90s was not a common thing. And they had to make their sacrifices to make that work. I think, but they're also from an age which is more of a you should mold yourself into your work. And I think now my children are going into an age where they need to unlock where they are like their superpowers, or however you want to talk about it, where they're
Mm,
super special. And that's not a stationary thing. That's an ever evolving and growing thing. And I like to talk about how we're hardwired. There are certain that memory thing I can't change. Funnily enough, I have this thing where I seem to build trust really quickly, one to one with people. It seems to happen. It means they typically then open up and share stuff with me, pretty quickly. And because of the way my brain works with a big picture, I can then see how this all fits together, which is super useful when it comes to working in big corporations or anywhere like that, because you find out all this extra stuff and you can make your decisions to go in line with the bigger picture that you probably aren't meant to know. Not that you've been told something you shouldn't, but just you've got more information or people are being more honest with you than maybe they would be with others. And you stop and go, well, hang on, that trust thing's nothing to do with being neurodiverse, as far as I'm aware. But that's part of my personality and part of how I'm like
mm,
hardwired. So I want to use that stuff. I also learn quickly. That's another great one. I'm very logical. That's another great one. So I struggle with facts and figures like history, but anything you can put logic to, like physics, maths, but also businesses, structure, what we're trying to achieve, strategy is all logic, actually. If I can put
yeah,
a logic thing to it, I really get it and really get it fast. So, so then I know if I go in this way, if I use these skills or I nurture and growth other skills around those, I'm going to thrive and survive, succeed. And I want the kids to understand theirs so that they go into the world and can really lean into that. And I reckon that's going to be one of the big shifts between my parents' generation and their generation. There's a lot of shifts in between, but I think there'll be a real position to hang on, this is what I can do and really deliver an ad. Who needs me?
yeah,
Actually, we need that skill here. We don't need everyone with that skill. We just need 2 people with that skill. We need 4
yeah.
people with this other skill, and we
So,
need. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, no,
Um,
I think, and it was quite interesting something you said there, Mike, where you're almost willing your children to find their superpower, and almost we want to do that with all children, don't we? Because all children are not going to be accountants, doctors, scientists, astronauts, supermarket staff, nursery workers. Um, just find what what is your thing, or what makes you happy, or what makes you go, like you just said, yeah, I definitely did not like history and geography. I was an English, and I enjoyed French for some reason, but I think it was because it was the oral French lessons. So I knew quite early on I was a communicator and a performer. That was my superpower. Um, God, it would be lovely if we could almost build that into the system so that early on that becomes part of finding out who you are and what your superpower is, as opposed to my name's Mike Cole, my name's Sonal Dave.
Yeah.
And you added that in, isn't it? And my superpower is, God, we
Yeah.
need to change how we introduce ourselves these days and add in our superpowers into the conversation as well. Now, I really found that,
I would like that to show from our actions. I'd
yeah.
like it that what you do and how you come across in everything you do demonstrates this is where you're incredible. And you can only do that if you're in a space where you get to use it. If you're
Yeah.
in a space where you're required to do other things all the time, you don't get to show and demonstrate it.
And I think there's an element, and I go from my own experience, you also need an environment that allows for that. Because
Mm.
I was definitely, historically, I say, sounding like I'm 94 years old, in an environment where if I hadn't been the bold, independent Indian woman that I was, I would have failed really quickly. But because the environment wasn't supportive, understanding, as
Mm.
it would probably be a big part of that. But that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah.
So
So,
I was going to go on. Sorry, go on.
well, I was going to say, linked to that. So I tend to talk about there's strengths and there's weaknesses, and there's something in between the two. And it's like okayville. And I always say it's like my cooking and my ironing. They're totally, they're okay. They're totally fine. But you wouldn't eat my food and be like, Mike, that's the best meal ever. You're never going to say that. That's just not me. And that's okay. Like it's fine. It's nice. Well, yeah, Mike, it was nice. That was good. Um, we have a whole bunch of stuff in there, and that's I think where a lot of people get stuck at the minute. So it's not bad enough that it's in a weakness that means they should not do it and they need to change. No burning platform making them change what they're doing, but they're not in this incredible, really enjoyable state, and so they're in a stressed. It's okay because pay the bill, and it's not so stressful that it's going to do me any real harm, except actually I'm not really enjoying what I'm doing, but I'm just going to keep turning the handle of it. And that means that I have a house which is okay, but it's not the house I want. And I go on holidays which are okay, but they're not really the holiday. Do you know what I mean? And I think there's this whole thing that we're stuck, not all of us, but I think a lot of the UK at the minute are stuck in this okay zone. And if we could shift people up into their strengths,
Yeah,
then I think that would materially change what's going on.
yeah.
And there was one other thing I'd like to add. Sorry.
Go on, go on.
She's shutting me up. It's actually the challenge. So I said with the kids about understanding how they can thrive and what's special for them and all that. And I would love it if we could do that for all children. I would totally agree. And for everybody, like just literally for everybody. Step one is we need to understand what ours are, our strengths are. Absolutely. Step two is we have to look at other people for their strengths and not for their weaknesses. And
Hmm.
this we do not do,
Yeah.
because not everything, a lot of things like Twitter and social media and the press are about people's weaknesses. This is what they got wrong. This is where they failed. This is what they struggled to do. This is what they've messed up. And if we only focus in on their weaknesses and negativity, then yes, we miss their strengths. But then we don't ask them to do their strengths. So the teams that I've been involved in that have been, really exceptional, typically didn't start that way. Typically, everyone was kind of doing their usual okay thing. They were pulling people out of their strengths and focusing in on their weaknesses. And when we just recognized, but hang on, that's your strength. That's your strength. That's your strength. I've got this task. It fits your strengths. It fits your weaknesses. I'm not asking you to do it. Of course I'm
Yeah.
not. That would be mad. I'm going to ask you to do it. And when we sort of literally sat around a table in one of the teams and recognized each other's strengths, and then recognized that's where the work should go, unless somebody said, I want to learn to grow and nurture that.
Mm,
So doesn't stop them from doing it. But we're
yeah.
not asking people to just focus on their weaknesses. And honestly, the team performance leapt. It was absolutely incredible.
Okay. And what makes me really smile at what you've just said is that when I'm talking about neurodiversity and neurodiverse conditions, I'll often hear people talk about, oh yes, ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyscalculia. I know those conditions. But do you know Mike? Do you know Zoe? Do you know
Mm.
Sonal? Do you know Shayla? And it's interesting how they focus on that label and not the human behind. But yeah, we could talk about this forever. I think it's one of those conversations that we're going to be part of that team that's going to change the world, because everyone I've spoken to is so excited and wants to continue this journey and not stop in terms of just sharing and getting people talking about it, whether it's in their teams, in their families, in the community, because the more people talk about it, the more others will feel it's okay to talk about it.
Yeah.
If people aren't talking about it, then people will assume, oh, well, you don't talk about it. So I'm going to move on to my favorite topic right now, only because I'm holding it in my hand. Um, so the journal. Do you journal?
It's a great question. And it's an interesting one actually, because so no, I don't journal in the sense that I think most people would take for journaling. And there's good reasons for it. You mentioned, and I'm really pleased you said, that the journal is aimed at the majority, but not all neurodiverse people. And I think that's really important. So within dyslexia, it represents in different ways, different people, affects different people in different ways. And for me, writing isn't really, it doesn't do it for me. Let's say it that way. Funnily enough, reading is still the best way of me consuming information, but it's the most tiring way for me consuming information, which is also interesting, because then people go, well, I won't send you lots of written stuff. No, do, because I'll consume it better. I'll remember it. I can take action on it better. I just need to balance my energy. That's all.
Mm.
So for me, reflection is really important, both as a coach, but even before I started doing the coaching journey, I would reflect on things. I would look at how things are going. I would consider personal growth and development has been really important to me my entire life. And that comes from reflection. And reflection can be what's gone well today, what's been a challenge today. It can be this week, it can be this month, it can be every time I do something, including this call, I will come away and I will spend a tiny, and I mean like a moment, just going, what could I have done better? Just to myself.
Mm.
And the next time I will have adapted, I will have built that in. It's just the way I am. And it means it's why I learn quickly. It's just the way that I get through the learn curve. So I think journaling is important because I think reflection is really important. But actually, I type a few things every now and again, but I mainly just think to myself.
So
What's
it's
your-
interesting you say that, because in the journal, one of the things that I have put in how to use this journal is that you don't have to write things down.
Mm,
You could actually use the questions as prompts. Now, whether you then voice note your response, or whether you draw. For some people, it's drawing.
yeah.
For me, that would be a stick man, because I can't draw. But
Right.
for some people, I personally don't journal writing.
Mm,
I vocalize my reflection,
mm,
and my poor husband and two dogs have to listen.
yeah.
So there are different ways for different people. And in fact, that was one of the things that came out of the focus group, that, some people can't read. So what's going to happen there? Where they don't have the support of a parent or a carer or an adult to help them, um, then we'll need to find different ways to help them. If they can read, but they don't really like writing, well, then they can draw, scribble, doodle, voice note it, speak it out loud. Just finding different ways that work for the individual, because as we've all said, we are all individual, we are all unique, and we all work in different ways. Um, the other thing that came out of the focus group was they all said we really should have, um, these in the journal, mandalas,
Mm,
because what they were sharing with me was that, again, a most, but not all, adults or children with neurodiverse conditions do actually find mandalas quite relaxing in that they can get quite focused, it can be quite meditative, and it can almost be like, well, it's my mandala, so I can choose if I want to, what colors I want to use.
Yeah.
If I want to color in the lines, if I want to color around the lines, if I don't want to color, I can use names, words, letters, numbers. It's almost you use it how you want to use it. And then throughout the journal, there's also things like that way, my happy thoughts become my reality. So
Mm.
just little prompty messages of inspiration, just hoping to create a bit of positivity, a little bit of a safe place, as well as an option of how you want to use the journal. And what's been really interesting is that, you know, hey everyone, I've launched 2 journals, one for adults and children, and it's for people from the neurodiverse community. I actually had some people who bought the journal who do not have a neurodiverse condition,
Yeah.
but actually found the structure worked for them because they would open a blank page and kind of,
So,
what do I write down? And actually the prompts actually really helped them. And then one of the interviews I did, Tina Cad is a speech and language therapist, and she said, "Oh, Sonal, this could actually help people who've had brain trauma or even Alzheimer's or dementia in a way to be able to record, what's happened so that if they do start forgetting, they can still go back and look at that." And I thought, really? So anyway, I got somebody to test it and it worked. So I
good.
was like, okay. So this in itself just shared with me that we sometimes create things with a thought in mind, and it can be quite a close thought in mind
Mm.
of who it's going to help or the benefit it's going to add or the value to the individual or the organization. But actually, if you just step away and take a moment and ask some other people, the view is very different.
Yeah.
So that's been a huge learning for me, definitely.
So there's a couple of bits in there. One of which is if you took the same sample, so you took a focus group and crafted this very deliberately with a very, very deliberate intent. And I think that's a really good idea. It'd be interesting if you took a focus group of, wider society, but the similar kind of size of focus group, whether you'd actually get the same answer, which you may well do, because it might just be the right way of doing it, regardless of neurodiversity or not. The other thing, of course, is that there's an awful lot of undiagnosed neurodiversity out there. There is a growing number of adults getting diagnosed because their children are getting diagnosed, and they're like, oh, but I'm just like, that trait's from me. And then they're like, oh, and I come right back to, I was picked up because my brother was tested. Well, my traits weren't strong enough to have been picked up in their own right, I don't believe. And I think I would have got all the way through probably to now, probably actually to a couple of years ago, when we'd have gone, well, hang on, the stuff that's showing in the children, which others are saying that is, where's that come from? Well, that's a lot like me. So, and I think people then say, do I think people should go out and get tested? No, because I don't think it's about labels. I think it's about understanding ourselves well enough. If you need
Mm.
it to feel happy about yourself, then fine. But I don't think it's about the label. I think it's just accepting that's part of who you are. And, can the journal help them? Of course, because absolutely structure helps. And I like the idea of doodling. I wish I could show you, but it's pinned on the wall. We've got this really beautiful one with focus written on it with, I may grab it in a second if I can get it. And my wife did it, and she's not neurodiverse, as far as we're aware. And, but it was a thing. There's almost the reflection, it's almost meditative, isn't it? That idea of, so I do most of my reflection, my thinking reflection. I will talk out loud to myself. I'm a bit of an extrovert though, but I will talk out loud to myself, probably going for a little walk just down a lane just here. I live in a lot of greenbelt fields just over there, and so, or if I'm on my own in this room, I'll talk to myself about it, and I often do that. So I suppose I don't voice note it, so to speak. but just
Yeah.
the art of saying it, of making it into sentences and saying it, probably for me is as powerful as writing it down.
Yeah. And actually, whether it's writing, drawing, doodling, voice note, vocalizing it, they're all different ways of letting go, in
Mm.
that you're taking it out of your inner self and releasing it. And that in itself is an exceptional way to help you to then be able to go, I've done that. Now what's next? Mike, I'm conscious of time. So
Okay.
I am, and I want to make sure that I do ask you these three questions.
Okay.
So they are burning questions, but it's actually been really fascinating talking to you. And don't be surprised if I come back and ask you to join me, because I think
Feel
there were
free.
some really good nuggets in there that we could really unpack and talk about more. Just to help people to understand this all a bit better and almost feel more comfortable in their own lives, to progress and not worry about what they can and can't do, and actually just focus on what they want to do, which is really, really important. But if you could do one thing to change the world to be a better place, what would that be, Mike?
So I definitely link back to what we said earlier around if everyone could magically understand what their hardwired strengths were, that'd be my first step. If I had one, that's what I'd do, and then I'd work tirelessly to encourage people to talk to each other about their strengths and let each other go about their weaknesses.
Perfect. What is your favorite animal and why?
Yeah. So what I probably need to do is work out default answers to these. So coming back to the processing speed thing, questions like this are always like, um, favorite animal will vary day to day. I've probably said giraffe before because I mean they're just awesome. They just look incredible. And I had a really cool giraffe toy when I was a child, which when I got it was as big as me. It was a lovely giraffe. So I like giraffes. I think they're pretty cool. But ask me a different day and I'll probably give you a different answer.
I do like giraffes as well, because apart from the fact they're really tall, they're really quite elegant as well, aren't
Yes.
they, as
Yeah.
animals? Yeah, no, I like
Until
that
you
one.
see them eat, and then you realize that they rip the leaves off trees with their tongues, and then you're like, okay, maybe less elegant now, but yeah.
Yeah, just don't. I remember going to a giraffe sanctuary. Um, God, was it Kenya or was it South Africa? One of those countries, and we were allowed to feed them. And I think that kind of, yeah, don't eat from me, but just walk around and look lovely. So I
Yeah.
totally agree with you there. And then, who is your favorite superhero and why?
Oh, good question. I did have one. You see, it's now coming to mind now. It would be someone who it'd be someone who isn't born with like incredible skills, but who I can't narrow it down. Can I do favorite Harry Potter character?
Perfect. Who is your favorite Harry Potter
Favorite
character?
Harry Potter character, although my children need to not listen to this bit, so if they're listening, they need to stop because we've not got to the final book yet. Neville is my favorite Harry Potter character,
I
and
know
Neville's my
why, because
favorite.
I've watched it.
Okay, so at the very end, when all is lost and all is done, and it looks like it's over, he's the one that goes, I'm going to stand up and make it count. And the reason I think it matters so much is he's basically going, I'm about to get killed. I'm going to go
Mm,
and stand in the way, and I'm going to die in doing this because no chance. No, he's got no chance of beating Voldemort, right?
mhm.
But he was the one that was brave enough to say, I'm going to stand up and do it. And I think that's what we need. Not people that are going to stand up and go and aggressively attack other people because that's not what he did. He just went, no, I've got to do this. And I love the evolution of him through the whole thing from really kind of weedy, scared kind of person at the beginning. He gets more of a personality as he goes. And just that defining moment to me. And that's what I love, is where we stand up for what we care about, but we do it in the right way.
Way. No. Mike, thank you so, so much for being here with me today. It has been an absolute pleasure getting to know you, um, understanding a bit more about what you do, who you are as a parent, with your wife and 2 children, hearing about some of your ambitions, but what really kind of stands out for me is that you're just so down to earth and you just kind of get on with it and do what needs to be done. And yeah, it might take a little bit longer, but that's okay. I might forget something, but that's okay. And if we could use that "that's okay" almost like a little mantra, wow, that would be just so powerful, wouldn't it? That's okay.
Yeah.
Powerful mantra. So I really want to take the opportunity to say thank you, thank you, thank you for taking your time out and being here with me today. I'm just going to retire you to the waiting room, but do you have any final words of wisdom as well as where people can find you?
Awesome. Well, so first off, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to talk, and I think it's important that these conversations are happening, and I'm pleased you're doing it, and I'm pleased you're taking action with things like the journal to really help unlock more in this space. So no, I think that's really cool. Yeah, I'd love to connect with people. So I'm at This Mike Cole on most of the platforms, certainly on Instagram and LinkedIn. That would be great. And if you don't mind, I've knocked up a special web page for anyone listening and watching. So if they want to know a bit more about themselves, particularly around how they're motivated, there's a really cool offer on there. If they went to thismikecole.com/Sonal, there we go, especially for you, look. And they'll see something really cool there. So that's thismikecole.com/Sonal. That'd be great. But I say thank you so much for having me on. If anyone has any questions or wants to ask me anything, feel free to reach out. And if you'd ever like me back, then let me know.
Thank you so much, Mike, and
Cool.
I'll speak to you soon.
Will do. Thank you.
So, everyone, that was the awesome Mike Cole sharing who he is, about his family, about his work, his ambitions, what he wants to achieve in life, not only for himself, but also for the bigger world out there as well. If you do have any questions for Mike, you can go directly to Mike at thismikecole.com or at This Is Mike Cole, or you can come to me and I can direct you to Mike or share the question with him as well. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this just as much as I have. And the journals are in the back and they are also on Amazon. I look forward to speaking to you all soon and continue sharing your feedback. It really does inspire me to do more of these interviews. But for now, thank you so much and bye bye.